Hello and welcome to today's panel discussion. Today we are joined by the fabulous Reich and Michael Judd as we discuss uncommon fruits for North America. We're thrilled to welcome two of the world's top plant geeks getting geeky with us as we file through the top 10 fruit plants from each of our guests. I hope you gentlemen don't mind being referred to as being plant geeks. I consider that a high compliment, and I am one too. Let me read your bios. I'm sure I'm going to leave a bunch out, so feel free to add anything at the end. Lee Reich, PhD, is an avid Farmdener, more than a gardener, less than a farmer, with graduate degrees in soil science and horticulture. After working in plant and soil research with the USDA and Cornell University, he shifted gears and turned to writing, lecturing, and consulting. His books include A Northeast Gardener's Year, The Pruning Book, Weedless Gardening, Uncommon Fruits for Every Garden, Landscaping with Fruit, Grow Fruit Naturally, and Growing Figs in Cold Climates. He lives and works on his Farmden in New Paltz, New York. Michael Judd has worked with agroecology and whole systems designs throughout the Americas for 2 decades, focusing on applying permaculture and ecological design. His projects increase local food security and community health in both tropical and temperate growth regions. He is also the author of Edible Landscaping with a Permaculture Twist and For the Love of Pawpaws. Michael lives with his family along the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains near Frederick, Maryland. Guys, thanks so much for being here. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks for having us.
Yep, happy to be here too.
I'm going to do a little bit of inquiry into your stories before we get into the top 10 plant list. And it's okay if we don't go 10, if we don't get through them all, whatever. It's going to be great because you guys are both have a sort of deep knowledge of plants and fruits, as we were talking before we went live here about how much you both have studied and been passionate in both of those areas. But Lee, I'd like to just ask you real quick, tell us a little bit about the Farmden idea. Where did it come from? Why do you prefer it over farming or gardening?
So when I first moved to my present property, I had a house and there was a sort of a ragged lawn around it, and it was 3/4 of an acre, and I planted extensive. I just kept, there was a garden where I started, where already here, so with a broken down fence and everything. So I just made my garden there. I had to have a garden somewhere, and then I planted some apple trees along one side of it. I planted some pawpaw trees in the front, and over the years, after about 15 years, I had quite a bit planted. It was on 3/4 of an acre. And since I do write about gardening, and not everybody that reads what I write is as crazy about gardening as I am, I figured this is like something anybody could do because I'm doing 3/4 of an acre. It's not taking too much time. And then I had the opportunity to buy a field just to the south adjoining my property. It was an acre and 3/4.
Mm.
So I figured, well, that's since I write about gardening, I should test some things. So instead of having two kiwi vines, I planted 20 kiwi vines.
Oh, yeah.
Having two pawpaws, I planted 20 pawpaws,
Nice.
and on and on. And I also thought, oh well, I got space. I'll plant chestnuts. I planted, and this is not for sale. Was just for home use. And so I planted 8 chestnut trees, which is insane for home use. And it just went on and on like that. And I figured at that point, it's not a farm. I'm not selling it. Plus, it's not that much acreage, and it's a lot of different things. It's not one crop that just concentrate on to sell.
Yeah.
And I also thought I could test market some of the fruits, the uncommon fruits that I was growing,
Yep.
just to see. Where I live, there's extensive apple growing, and to me, it seems like for various reasons, I don't have to get into it, but it's sort of a stupid place to grow apples. But, it's the Hudson Valley of New York, and it's 90 miles north of New York City. And the main reason apples are grown here is because 100 something years ago, you can take them right down the Hudson. But anyway, so I started doing all that, and I thought it's not a garden because it's crazier than a garden. It's not a farm because it's smaller than a farm, so I said it's a farm. And this is more than one person can take care of and remain sane.
And you do make a little bit of money, it sounds like, off of that footprint by selling plants or
Yeah,
vegetables or that
I
type of
have a
thing.
nursery sale once a year for 2.5 hours.
Wow.
And, well, a lot of people, local people know me, so they flock, and even
Yeah.
less than local. And every year, though, I tell myself it's not like I don't need the small amount I make from it. And it's like a lot of work between marketing and stuff. So every year,
Totally.
like right around now, because I'm setting up for it. a month, and I'm thinking, why do I keep doing this? And I think because I'm addicted to propagating plants. If I
Yeah.
Yes.
cut some stems off a grapevine, I figure each one of these can make a plant. And
Yeah.
then I forget that I got to pot it up and market it and all that. And then I do sell some test market some of the fruits that I think have the best commercial value. That maybe instead of apples, or in addition to apples, some of the growers here could grow these other crops.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great. And Michael, I should say, Michael and Lee, you guys know each other pretty well, so feel free to ask each other questions as we go. I
No,
don't mind that at all.
I'm laughing over here because I'm with you, Lee. I've gotten my nursery hours down to 6 hours, but I like the 2.5 hours, and I'm the same way. Why am I doing this? And I just love the plants and I love sharing them, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of plants to care for, but it's
Yep.
it's the love. It's the love that keeps us going.
Well, Michael, what about you? Are you on a Farmden? Are you on a little permaculture property? What's your growing situation like?
It's like a permaculture homestead. We are fortunate to be on about 25 acres that we steward. Most of it's all woods. There's about 3 acres of open sun, and that is completely filled now.
Yeah.
Just extensive food forests, hundreds of species, hundreds and hundreds of cultivars of everything. I'm kind of like Lee. It's more than one person can take care of, but it's just it's such a passion, such a love. And I like to trial things too to see what does really well. Our site's in the Blue Ridge Mountains, here right at the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, and we have a wonderful climate. We're about zone 6B, 7, and we get lots of rainfall, lots of humidity, and we're in a holler, an Appalachian holler. So we have a little creek that runs through it, and it's very moist, very stagnant, very funky. So it's a great trialing ground for the Mid-Atlantic region to see what will do well without constant inputs and care, which is what I'm all about. So I've been able to trial, 15 different types of black currants, tons of different types of figs, hardy kiwis, of course, pawpaws, jujubes. And it's like, well, what's really thriving and doing well is a part of what I do here as well. We live in a circular straw bale house that we built from the woods around us. It's all roundwood timber framed, earthen floors, living roof. It's like it just blends in. So it's very much it's a permaculture life in that sense, where everything that we're doing and living is sort of holistically intertwined. But plants are my love and passion, and it seems like an addiction, like Lee. It's like something that drags us along sometimes. But hey, if you're gonna be addicted to something, why not be plants? I'll take it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a generative asset in the permaculture language, right? It's lovely to partner with something that just gives you more and more, but it does become an energy requirement. It's like, well, now I have to manage all this. Dang. Michael, I love asking this question of permaculture minded folks. Just because it gets interesting results, and usually it's like profound answers. But what impact has permaculture made on your life, would you say?
Woo, that's a big one. Permaculture is one aspect that's blended in my life. I actually came into the understanding for regenerative holistic systems by living with indigenous peoples in Latin America. I lived in rural Latin America for almost 18 years of my life. And I lived in very remote areas with some of the last of the Lacandon Mayans and cultures that lived, in perennial food forest systems before I even knew what they were. I got to experience how humans can live regeneratively, generation after generation, on the same zone, the same region. And that was very different than, having grown up here in the Mid-Atlantic and this sort of consumptive land use model. Where things get used up very quickly and you're constantly pulling in new material. There, everything was utilized and they had everything they knew. So that blew me away. I also got really sick living in the jungles down there and had to kind of, limp home. And while I was back here, I went, because I was interested in natural building, because when I was down there in the jungle, I was like learning how to build with bamboo and thatch palm. And I was like, wow, I really want to continue doing that. When I came back to the U.S., I heard about a circular straw bale structure that was being built at Earth Haven Permaculture Community in North Carolina. I didn't know what
Yep.
permaculture was at all. I was like, but I want to go and learn and work on a structure like that. So I went down there and boom, I just landed in the middle of the genesis, the early years of Earth Haven being developed, which is this amazing, like 350 some acre permaculture site. And it was at the time, full of these great teachers. You mentioned Peter Bain here before we started. Peter Bain
Yep.
was there. Chuck Marsh, Patricia Allison, Goodhart. I mean, some of the most amazing permaculture people I've ever met. I arrived there, started working on the natural building, and fell into sort of like a living permaculture manual as they were, sort of bringing this site, to life. And so that impacted my life because it then gave me tools that I could use within this culture, my culture of North America. So it was like for me, I was able to translate and utilize and have a framework to work from what I'd experienced living with indigenous peoples. And then I just, I've been going back and forth between, rural Latin American culture and, the U.S., biodynamics, arid lands farming. I went and lived in the desert in Spain for a year, and I just mix it up. And permaculture is kind of the closest umbrella that I feel like that I could that I can use, but I pull from a lot of different sources, and then I spin my own and just come up with my own creations now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And that's a great background. I did not realize that with the living with the indigenous for so long. That's amazing. So, and Lee sort of does not identify with the permaculture brand. And Lee, I totally get that because it's like, for one, most of us, at least me, I don't like to have a label. And two, sometimes within the permaculture community, you get rubbed the wrong way. It's like, oh, if that's permaculture, I don't want to be associated with it. But I'm curious what your take is on it. You've been in and amongst these sort of ideas for many, many years. And I'm sure, and we talked earlier, some people might say, hey, man, you're doing permaculture. So what's your sense of the word permaculture, any critiques you may have, or why you avoid the term to identify with what you do?
Yeah, well, as I told you before when we were talking, that I've been accused more than once of doing permaculture, and I keep telling people it's not permaculture, or it, I do a lot of permaculture things, and I sort of I'm at odds with certain permaculture principles that just uh, I don't I don't think they pan out well, and so I guess, and the way when I started gardening, I actually came from totally different perspectives. It's interesting that we're both into so many of the same things, Michael and I, but that I came from a totally different perspective. I came from no agricultural background and had no real exposure to agriculture. And then when I was in my 20s, I dropped out of graduate school in quantum chemistry and lived, and lived in Vermont for a year and basically played pool and hiked and went to the library. I was a really good pool player and went to the library and read about gardening. And after a year in Vermont, I just became so taken reading about gardening. I just like, this is what I want to do. And I took my route was not going, which would have been quite interesting, going to Latin America because I love Latin America. But I instead went to back to graduate school and I got 3 graduate degrees, and I sort of hit the ground running, and it was great. I mean, garden crazy. It's like that's all I want to do is just garden, and and I started out. It was the beginnings of the organic gardening movement when it became more popular in the early '70s.
Yeah.
I'm that old, and 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 I embraced it totally, which was sort of interesting because like I'd be taking soil science classes at the university, and if they said anything about organic gardening, they would pan it. But I thought it was
Mm.
good. I had this framework of solid science, and then I could make my own decisions about, organic gardening. And I embraced a lot of organic gardening things that I shouldn't have. That I now realize I shouldn't have. But then, as the years went by, various things I was doing. Eventually, I guess I must have heard the word permaculture somewhere. But when I started out growing here, for instance, on the 3/4 of an acre, I was pressed for space. I had 3/4 of an acre, and I wanted to plant a lot of stuff. so, so I would mix plantings. If something could tolerate, I had gooseberries, for instance, they could take some shade, so I would put them in the shade of other plants. and I guess that's permaculture. But but I mean, I could list the things. I wrote something on the internet years ago, but still up there is why I am not a permaculturalist. And I've attended permaculture design workshops. That's what they call it, right? PD.
PDCs. Yep.
Yeah, certifications. And I give my talk about why I'm not a permaculturalist, and everybody laughs, and then they go back to their permaculture, irrespective of what I say. But but I mean, basically, my philosophy in gardening and farmdening has been that I have a lot of faith in natural systems. I really think that natural systems work, and I try and do everything as much as possible to go in that direction. And I have a lot of faith in science. Some people, say science. Oh, don't get so sciencey with me, but good science.
Right.
Uh, I I'm sort of, I don't really shy away from controversy, and I've been to lectures where I raise my hand in my most friendly voice, which means also raising it an octave, asking ask a question innocently, but often it doesn't go over well. So yeah, so that's I could tell you what I do permaculturally and what I don't like permaculturally, if that would be appropriate, or we can just skip over that.
Well, I'm itching to talk plants, but I wonder if Michael has any thoughts on the last
Nah,
thing
I'd
you
rather
said.
talk plants. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Lee, what we'll do is I'll track down that article and I'll link that because I'd like to read that. And I'm always open to constructive criticism, and I'm also open to people thinking about permaculture with the lowercase p, not being like so identified with it. But yeah, I take bits and pieces
Right.
from that canon of
But but
knowledge.
I but I do have here on the site. I have solar panels. I have ducks. I got my requisite shiitake logs. I have
Yes, right.
I have interplants, but I am not a permaculturalist.
Do you have bodies of water on your site? Do you have ponds or things of
Yeah,
that
well,
nature?
like Michael, I'm in a similar spot. I'm in zone 5. I guess I was upgraded to zone 6, but I'm really the colder part of zone 5, so I might still be zone 5. I'm also in a valley of a small river called the Wallkill River here. So the cold air comes down here. It's colder than other places, damper. And it's really, I always tell people that the best soil is not a rock in the soil, it's river bottom soil and the worst air. So it makes for a lot of diseases and insects. I also have 10,000 acres of forest behind me, which I do not own, and but this is a good reservoir for
Yeah.
insects and diseases. So it's definitely a challenging site. Oh, but you asked if I have bodies of water. Right now, I have a body of water down there.
It's a temporary one.
A swale that comes by, and in the spring, it's always got water in it. And now I foolishly hand dug a small pond for the ducks, and I didn't realize that I don't know anything about ducks. I just grow them and eat their eggs and laugh at them as they wander around. But I didn't realize that ducks make ponds bigger. They keep on sort of going into mud. So now it's actually they've done their own landscape.
Yeah, they're like, thanks for getting it started for us.
Right.
All right, well, let's hear however y'all want to approach this. It doesn't have to be a top 10 necessarily, but Michael, you're known for pawpaw, so maybe you want to launch us into pawpaw and
Yeah.
why people might consider growing a pawpaw somewhere in North America. And of course, give us relevant like caveats, like you might not grow a pawpaw if you live in the Arctic Circle or something.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I pulled up some pictures here so folks can get a visual of what we're talking about. The pawpaw, like I said, I lived in the tropics and grew food forests down there of all the members of the custard apple family, of which the pawpaw is the most northern character of. You guys hear me all right?
It
There's
faded.
some
It faded
noise,
slightly for a second.
but then it faded.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So the pawpaw is the northernmost member of the custard apple family, and it's the only one that hiked north, over hundreds of thousands of years, on receding glaciers up to what we call modern day southern Ontario in Canada. And so basically, it's a fully tropical fruit that grows in the cold in the north, and it's delicious. It's one of the best tropical fruits I've ever had. And I've traveled the world trying tropical fruits, all fruits everywhere. And I put the pawpaw, especially when you got good genetics, select genetics, I put pawpaw up there as one of the best tasting fruits. And it's just there's nothing else like it. There's no other tropical fruit that's growing, wild and or that you can cultivate, in our region. So for those reasons alone, it's miraculous, and then it's gorgeous. It's what I call an edible landscape all star, in the sense that it's got these beautiful tropical lobed leaves that really aren't that challenged by disease and insects. It's very attractive, gorgeous fall foliage, and then tasty fruit. Something you want to go out and get. Because I'm really like in permaculture, we observe what does well in your region and work with that energy. And for where I'm at, pawpaws are everywhere. So it's like it's easy to say, okay, well, that energy's here. All I need to do is really start bringing it out into the full sun, create those conditions with, generous deep mulches and, passive water harvesting and swales, and pull them out in full sun and get really good genetics. And I'm getting these gorgeous, large, like upwards of 2 pounds, a piece pawpaws with very little seeds and delicious flavors in them. So it's like it doesn't take a whole lot because that energy's already here.
Yeah.
Can you flip the
You said,
slide?
you said,
I've got some
you said,
sexy pictures in there.
oh, I'm sure. Yeah. But real quick, and feel free to jump in, Lee, with other comments or questions. You said full sun. I've always heard it's a shade tolerant species, or it prefers to start its life in the shade. Is that true?
Right. So where you typically find it is in the woods or on the edge of the woods. And that's because it needs a certain amount of moisture for those big leaves, right? Anything with that big a leaf is going to be, losing a lot of moisture. So if you're going to bring it out in full sun, you just need to create the conditions for that. And like I say, that's wind breaks. So they don't like strong winds. So if you're going to bring them out into the full landscape, make sure you have a wind broken spot or create those wind breaks to bring the pawpaws out in. Deep mulch, I do deep sheet mulching before I plant anything, ideally at least a season in advance. I'm dropping 8 to 10 inches of wood chips and straw and cardboard and newspaper and, manure, and I'm building that zone up. So it's a big sponge. So when I'm coming and planting my pawpaws into that, they have everything that they need, and boom, they thrive. Now, there's a bit of a misnomer about pawpaws needing shade for the first couple years of their life. I have proven by seed growing directly in full sun on my site at the very base of hugelkultur beds, which have that sweet spot of having lots of humidity and moisture nearby. But it's still a good idea to shade them the first couple of years, because typically you're buying a pawpaw tree that has a taproot like a nut tree that does not like to be messed with. And typically when you're buying a pawpaw from somebody, it's been in a pot for a couple of years, or it's been bare root dug, rather rudely. And you've compromised the vitality of that plant. And when you plant that in full sun, usually without enough mulch and proper conditionings, that tree is stressed, and the sun is going to scald it, and it's going to burn it down. And that's why people are like, yeah, you need to have shade for the first couple of years. But it's a misnomer. And I say that so that because a lot of people say, oh, I got pawpaws and I went and I planted them under my oak tree because that's where I thought you had to plant them. And then they're not going to get fruit, or they're going to get very little fruit, because you're only going to get fruit relative to how much light you get. And that goes for all your fruits.
If I could just interject some quickly. First of all, my experience with pawpaws is similar to Michael's. They do well in full sun with mulch, and as long as they have water. It's similar to, there's another fruit, blueberries, which grow where I am throughout the woods, but they're in the shade. And if you take these plants into the sun, they bear much better because they need that sunlight to make fruit, but they need to have moist ground. Which my blueberries is my best crop, and I have drip irrigation on them. And one other thing about and probably this is irrelevant now, but from what you said about the moisture, but a lot of people, when they say when pawpaws are young that they need shade, so that if you plant them from seed, but if you plant a grafted pawpaw, that's actually mature wood that's on the graft. So if it was possible that young pawpaws needed shade, a grafted pawpaw is just like a grown-up one, because it's mature wood that's grafted onto the rootstock, and it would
Right.
not
Yeah.
need shade. So whatever it doesn't need, it does not need shade when it's young, as long as it has good conditions.
Yeah, yeah, those are good points. Can you push the slides a little bit? I've got some more
I, I
pictures.
can't, but you
Yeah,
can.
I can.
I believe.
Yeah, I thought I could too, but I don't. I'm not seeing that option.
Oh, did I crop it away from you? Maybe that's what the problem is.
I don't know, but I've got
Hey,
some.
forgive us, folks. And
I've
and
got
don't worry about technical issues, guys. I mean, there's no. I think everybody gets it nowadays. Lee, while we're at it, and feel free to pull up more slides, Michael, and I can not crop out the thing that you need, maybe. But Lee, did Pawpaw make your top 10 list? Would you say is that up there?
You know, I got to be honest that I have pawpaw trees still, but I sort of lost my taste for pawpaws,
Oh,
which coincided with nobody has. The nice thing about pawpaws is they are beautiful plants, and they have little or no pest problems, and they bear well. And the problem is one problem they can get, which I don't mind since I don't like pawpaws anymore, is they get the one pest I have. I don't know if Michael you heard of this, the peduncle borer.
Yeah.
I love the name peduncle borer. It sounds like a
a good
It
name.
sounds like a Dr. Zeus thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, because I think it came in on some cyanwood that I got that I was grafting.
Mm-hmm.
But since I got that, I get very few fruits, and but like I said, I don't care.
Yeah. Okay,
So
so can you guys see this picture? Can you see this
oh yeah,
custard looking? So pawpaws have like a custard like consistency, and then when you've got really good genetics and you've got them picked at the right time, you're going to get, aromatic notes of banana and mango, pineapple. It's like a tropical medley that comes out. Now,
Yep.
the difference between a wild pawpaw that's not been selected, could be that it's quite small, full of, these large seeds, lima bean sized seeds, and could have bitter notes. There are good wild pawpaws, but one of the reasons that we have a pawpaw festival every year is to help people get the first experience be, the best it can be when you're talking about, cultivars of pawpaws picked, at the right time versus what someone might find in the wild that's been fallen for 5 days and bitter, and so trying to help people get the understanding of how awesome pawpaws can be.
and as far as my personal view of pawpaws, I'm keeping my mind open. I have not tasted, for instance, any of the Peterson variety pawpaw.
Ooh, well, you got to come down to the Pawpaw Fest, and Lee, you would be guest of honor. It's a
And
lot of
and
fun.
on that note, Michael, is it best for people to get seeds from the preferred genetics, or to do transplants, or to do grafting? How would you
Yeah,
suggest we
I mean,
move forward?
seeds. I mean, if you can get your hands on good seeds, it's always good to be able to grow out your own seeds, because then you can sort of, control the conditions and making sure that you're getting that full root expression. There are some good resources and nurseries for pawpaws, but there are only a few. I have them listed in my book, For the Love of Pawpaws. Starting from my favorites on down. But if you grow from seed, you want to. I mean, if you grow from select seedlings, so what are now being called select seedlings are seeds that come from grafted cultivars, so that you have good genetic parents, so to say, right? And oh, nice,
Hey,
handsome,
represent.
handsome book. Thank you, Lee. Um,
Highly recommended.
Great. Hey, can we
Excellent.
capture that?
Yeah, we'll get a
Um,
blurb.
yeah. Yeah, thank you. And this image I have pulled up out of the new edition of the book as well. But so select seedling will have good genetics in it. They'll come quite true to seed or to heredity, meaning that they're going to be pretty much like their couple of parents, their two parents, which cross-pollinated. And those seeds will produce pretty decent pawpaws, even if you did not graft them. But then, of course, grafting gives you the assurance of what you're getting. And I love Neil Peterson's pawpaws. He's got some of the best of the whole collection that's out there. Susquehanna, one of my favorites, a very rich tasting pawpaw, if you like that. On the other end of the lighter side of pawpaw tasting is Shenandoah. another one of Neil Peterson's. He named his pawpaws after U.S. rivers with indigenous names. Allegheny is a super favorite of mine. It falls right in the middle of that taste spectrum and has a really nice consistency to it. Potomac has these large, I think I might have an image in here of some of those 2 pound, up to 2 pound pawpaws are usually Potomac. Wow. And what's cool about them too is that they have a low seed to pulp ratio. So you're getting very few seeds. Some of Neil Peterson's are like 3% seed, and the rest is all that delicious pulp, right? With no bitter afternote tastes, which you can get in unselected or wild pawpaws. So it's kind of like a crab apple to a golden delicious sometimes, you know, when you're talking about pawpaws. So the experience can be quite vast. So let's talk about this map. This is the pawpaw possibilities. So, you know, it's hard to talk about zones when you're talking about plants because it's more about climate. It's more about, you know, what's your site like, you know, your rain, your soil, your wind exposure. So just because, you know, you can grow pawpaws in zone 5 doesn't mean they're going to do well everywhere there. But typically speaking, pawpaws are growing zone 5 to zone 9. And they're expanding themselves because, again, we're talking about a super adaptive species here. We're talking about a tropical species that hitchhiked itself all the way north, you know? So it's still doing that. It's still expanding through human interaction now, you know, in the Northwest, Pacific Northwest, and, you know, across all the way down through the Southwest. And then in Europe, it's big now. Europe is pumping out pawpaws. There's a couple of huge nurseries there, and they are spreading the pawpaw love all over the place. Italy did research projects on pawpaws years ago, and there's one of their releases in the nursery trade. It's called PRIMA 1216. South Korea has upwards of 1 million of them planted, partly just for their medicinal qualities. So we're talking a real phenomena here, you know, an international phenomena at this point. But you really want to get those conditions right. And let me see, I think I have another slide that maybe brings that to life, some of these conditions. Yeah, let me pull this one up. And so when it comes to pawpaws, again, you don't want the strong wind. You want good drainage. So another misnomer you find with pawpaws, a lot of times is people think, oh, they grow by the creeks, you know, they like it wet. No, you cannot plant pawpaws in wet soil. The roots will ferment and rot. They need drainage. Oftentimes you'll see them on the banks, the stream banks, where they're going to drain, but they love having all that humidity around them, and they like a moist soil, but they don't want to be in wet soil. So keep that in mind. If you have a very, very wet site, you know, do some hugelkultur mounds or swales, you know, create the bump up to plant your pawpaws in. And then average 12 feet of spacing, you know, that's designed for neglect. If you never prune or come back or do anything, they'll still fit. You want them to be within 20 feet of each other, ideally for cross-pollination. You know, they're pollinated by flies, beetles, gnats, you know, all these shady characters. So you want to boost, you know, the opportunity for that cross-pollination. And my food forests, I combine other things that flower at the same time to create more energy during the pawpaw flowering, which is now. And so I've got gummies flowering, I've got Juneberries flowering, you know, I've got my running comfrey flowering like crazy everywhere. So it's creating more activity, and I think that helps me with my pawpaw pollination. Some people will put their dog poop out there, their compost, you know, roadkill, you know. I don't want to sell it that way, but it's like you just want to try and get, you know, more of that fly activity. But I have no problems with it. You can also hand pollinate, which is, you know, something that actually works really well with pawpaws. Again, full sun if you have it. Partial sun, partial fruit, it works. I mean, they'll grow in the deep shade too, but they'll usually sucker and create a colony and propagate themselves that way versus through seed. I find some tend to sucker more than others, but in full sun, I don't find it to be much of an issue, not a big issue. I come around and snip the few that do pop up. But a lot of people have existing patches of pawpaws, and what I recommend there is thinning them out so you got a good 12 feet between everything, and try to get more sun to them to get some fruit.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. That was like a quick but deep dive into pawpaws and sort of like where to begin and where to start. So Lee, let's jump over to you. You know, maybe this is a hard question to answer, but do you have a top number one uncommon fruit currently that you would say this is my number one? I would plant it wherever I go.
The number one would be, I guess, based on the taste, ease of growth, and how much I eat of it. Because there's some that I have that I love the flavor of, but you don't get that much. And the example of that would be white alpine strawberries. I think they're the
Yes.
most delectable fruit, easy to grow, but
So good.
you don't get tons of them. But I'd say so. The number one, I'm just looking at my list here. I would say European black currant.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It's it's not a plant that everybody likes the flavor of, but everybody likes it. Cooked into various concoctions. I'm really bad at cooking with fruit, and I like eating fruit raw. So my whole book on uncommon fruits, all those fruits were ones that you just pop into
Raw.
without having to cook them. I mean, there's a lot of fruits that you can do that. But
Yeah.
black currants, I happen to love the flavor. And I started out growing them. They used to be banned throughout this country
Yeah.
because they're alternate hosts for white pine blister rust, which is true. And then Canada came out with some immune varieties, Consort, Crusader, and Contender. And years ago, geez, it must be like I don't know, 30 plus years ago, I got plants of Crusader, and I really loved them. And then there was some other ones that had some resistance, and I decided like black currant's better than white pines anyway. And it turns out that the ban, oh, and I forgot to say, the ban was also lifted for a number of reasons. First of all, because under good conditions, spores from ribes, which includes black currants, but there's a lot of wild ribes, can travel 100 miles. So
Jeez.
the ban wasn't that effective. Also, it turned out that other ribes like gooseberries and red currants are not all that susceptible. So the ban was lifted on those, and now it's pretty much. And I guess white pine in many places is no longer an important timber crop. So now the ban was lifted, and I planted. It's interesting because in New York, where I am, it went township by township. And when I first started growing gooseberries, if I lived 100 feet up the street, I would not have been allowed theoretically to plant gooseberries. But anyway, so I planted a few different varieties, but I always planted rust resistant ones, not immune, but rust resistant ones. And this was after I had consort, which was rust immune.
Yes.
And I came up with one especially, but I guess there's three that I especially like. And there's many varieties because it's a very popular plant in Europe, in Northern Europe. People love them, and
Yep.
and so the ones I came up with, my all-time favorite one is a variety called, and I love to say this, but Belaruskaja, which means white Russian. It's a Russian variety, and that one's really good. And I also grow Titania, which is another Russian variety. And actually, I can hardly tell the difference between the two, but I find them really much tastier than Consort, which I just stopped growing. And the only downside to it is my wife, uh, not to be sexist, but she does most of the picking. I do everything else. I really can't bring myself to pick berries. It's too tedious for me. But anyway, so she would pick them, but she didn't like black currants. Unfortunately, when I got Belaruskaja, she also now likes them. So now I have to share them with her.
Oh, I thought that was a good thing. We have a question here on the subject of
Black
ribes.
currants for me.
Those are mine, but you pick them.
And then before you get to that question, I'll just say that other nice things about black currants besides the flavors, they really no particular diseases. Well, everything gets some disease, but I've grown them for decades, and I haven't had to contend with any pest problems, including deer. Don't particularly like them, but my brother lived somewhere where there was a really heavy deer pressure, and they did eat his, but
Oh, okay.
mine they've never touched, and also they can take part shade. And what else? Birds don't eat them. My ducks don't eat them. And that's a big thing. My ducks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a great plant.
Yeah. The question here is Zone 9B, Houston, Texas, Gulf Coast. High heat, high humidity. Are any ribes, would they thrive there?
Yeah, I'd say Ribes odoratum, the clove currant, that grows wild from Texas.
You got quiet on me. I don't know. Can you hear Michael?
It's a little muffled. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Oh, now you're back. You're back. It could just be a lag issue. Keep going.
Or maybe I just can't be 6 inches away, and now you can't hear me. Now you can. Anyway, but clove currant, Ribes odoratum, is one of the toughest plants there is. It can take any amount of heat, cold, deer. The birds don't seem to eat it that much either. And the fruit's pretty good. I don't like it as much as the European blackcurrant. But the nice thing about the clove currant, it has these trumpet yellow blossoms.
Yeah,
They're
beautiful.
so fragrant that it almost makes it difficult to work outside when they're in bloom. It's like it's too heady. But I love it.
Wow. That's awesome. Hey, Lee, where do you plant your black currants typically? Do you put them in the shade? Do you put them around fruit trees? Do you just scatter them all throughout?
Well, I make them as part of the guild beneath my pawpaw trees. That was a permaculture joke.
Yeah, good one.
Thank you so much, Lee.
But that is where they grow.
Okay. What about you, Michael? Anything to add?
Yeah, I'll chime in because I'm a big fan of the black currant as well.
Let me just say one thing quickly.
Yeah.
As far as the person in Texas, black currant, gooseberry, and red currant, they are plants of northern climates. They don't like it too cold. But I used to live in Maryland also, and I grew black currants and gooseberries, so that's not too far south.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to chime in about because I've trialed a lot of the currants, and I feel like we're on that southern edge for them. We're like zone 7 here, and we're funky as well. And I've had a lot of them not thrive, and from trying a lot of the European, especially a lot of those Scottish ones.
Right.
So I've trialed, and so I've seen what works without a lot of input, and consort is the champion. Hands down. As far as now, I'm not talking about like going out there and eating them off the bush, but I'm talking about something that thrives and does really well in this warm climate. And they actually have the most flavor for value adding into jams and wines. And the blackcurrant jam is the favorite in our household, and that goes for our kids. Like my 4-year-old, she's just like, she could have any jam she wants, and she always wants blackcurrant. Like once you start eating blackcurrant jam, like nothing else tastes like good jam anymore. I don't know how to put it. Even the kids love it. So, so I'm a big fan of them. And Menage, I'm not even gonna try and say the last name of that.
It's Arnov or something. That was my other favorite one before I had a Belarus Gajah.
So Menage, I call it Menage the Great because I can't say that Russian last name, but it does well here as well. It's pretty robust, and it has a bigger berry that you can eat more out of hand. And if I take the time and I grow them in my garden and I give them more love, I could probably do some more of the black currants. But like if I'm planting them out in my food forest and stuff, and they need that extra care and love that they don't get, they don't tend to thrive here.
Well, they don't really need that much care though. Have you tried Belarus Gajah?
Yes, but when I say no care, I mean like I've got it gets pretty wild out there, and we have a resident herd of deer here. I mean we have like 25 head of deer on our site every day, right? Dang. And I'll confer that they don't like the black currant. They will nibble it, but that consort is strong enough and probably more potent than the others, so they pretty much leave it alone once it's up. So, but yeah, I'm a big fan of it. But I would say for people who are pushing that southern edge, to really definitely add consort to their mix because that might be the one that does best in the southern reach.
And also, and give it shade, even a little shade.
Yeah.
I actually before I lived in Maryland, I lived in southern Delaware, and I had consort there, but it was colder then.
Yeah, get the afternoon shade. But like the pawpaw, you could grow it in full sun if it's got really lush, constant conditions for it,
Yeah.
But otherwise, yeah, give it all that early day sun. Try to get it full sun, not like partial shade, but like sun and then protection from that afternoon intense light. Should get pretty good berries on it.
With all currants and ribes, you can take cuttings from them quite easily too to propagate them out. So I tend to buy various like this genetic variety, and then take cuttings from them. Don't tell anybody. Michael, how do you plant black currants or currants in general in your food forest area? Is it like one here and there? Is it a big row of them? What do you find in terms of growing?
I have them all over. I have been putting them on our gray water bed. We have a compost toilet, gravity fed gray water. for our house, and so I've got these two nice rounded growing beds on either side of our gray water trough, and it gets a good 6 hours of that early eastern sun, and then we got the woods behind us, and that blocks it from all the afternoon sun. So I pretty much find that to be a sweet spot, and I'll plant them, mostly in a row there, mixed up with some gooseberries and a couple pawpaws on that. Yeah, I find that's a sweet spot for them. I did have some growing around my pawpaws, but then I planted fuki, which is this perennial Japanese vegetable, which is awesome, but it's like huge. Like it jumps up to be like a
Huge.
solid 3 feet. So the
Yeah.
currents couldn't keep up, man. They're like trying to stick their heads out of the top, and eventually they've succumbed, because
Fuki
I try to
one.
get yeah, I try to get ground covers because I have about 3 acres of food forest. So I rely
Yeah.
heavily on my strong opportunistic ground covers, my running comfrey being the main one, which
Yeah.
means that things below that reach, just get, they're out. So
Yep.
I've started to put a few more gooseberries in my garden, and a few more currants on the edge of my inside of my garden where
Mm.
I can keep a little bit more of an eye on them and they're not get, overtaken because, I like things a little wild
Yep.
out and about.
Well, so Michael, I didn't even ask you, is pawpaw, would you call that your number one? I mean, I know you wrote a book about it, but
It's a
is that
tough
like
one.
your go-to?
It's a tough one. It's right up there neck and neck with jujubes.
Okay, let's
Jujubes
go into jujubes next. I
Jujubes
never tried a jujube,
are
and they do grow here
phenomenal.
in Michigan. I'm like southern Michigan, right? Somewhat with
Yeah,
protection, I think.
yeah. Before I move on from pawpaws, let me play that last slide because I've got a free
Oh,
offer
yep.
for people if they would like to, get a crash course. This is a free pawpaw. How do I say it, Lee?
Primer.
Trimmer.
Primer. Not a primer, a primer. It'll prime you either way. For getting into pawpaws, and it's a free. I got it free. I think Jesse will put the link in there for you,
Yes.
and so you guys can get sort of this elevator pitch going for it.
Thank you so much, by the way, Michael. That's an
Yeah,
awesome offer.
yeah. No, I'm happy. Something you can use for your dinner table conversation at least.
That's
All right,
right.
I got some pictures of jujubes. Let me pull them up here. You see that?
Yep, that looks great.
Okay, so I might let Lee lead off with jujubes. I mean, he's a jujube master too.
Well,
Yeah, go for it,
I
Lee.
don't know about that. I master maybe writing about it, but not growing it.
Ah,
It's really too cold here to ripen jujubes, and I have tasted them. Down at Wave Hill, I think it was, which is an ornamental garden in Upper Manhattan. I
I know
saw,
that one.
I
Yeah.
saw some plants there, and I've tasted them. I mean, I wasn't crazy over them. It's a very cool plant, though. First of all, it's a beautiful plant, and the fruit is interesting because it's like an apple before it turns green, then it dries to like a date. And I've only tasted, maybe one variety, and maybe it was a
Ooh.
seedling, so I would not judge on that. But
Yeah.
I,
They're
I grew it once, and the other thing is it bears really quickly because I grew it once and it died back, and then it started growing again the next season. It just died back almost to the ground, and
Hmm.
next growing season it shot up from there, and all of a sudden it's loaded with flowers again. But
Wow.
yeah.
the fruit was seed. It was a grafted tree, so the fruit was was on the seedling rootstock, and
Ah,
it never ripened anyway, so it wouldn't have been good.
ah.
So jujubes, yeah, the challenge for the more northern growers, they probably start to mature their fruit in zone 6. I mean, unless you could create a microclimate potentially in zone 5. The trees,
Hmm.
like Lee says, will grow up there in zone 5, but getting that fruit to ripen, it needs that longer summer heat, very similar to pawpaws, and start to mature at the same time as pawpaws for us, which is September down here. Um, but they are phenomenal. It's one of the most widely grown fruits in Asia and China, and it's odd that we hardly know it, and it's like this huge thing out there in the world.
Yeah.
Just to interject there, I think it was Frank Meyer, the plant explorer from 100 plus years ago. I mean, he sent tons of, or they, because of him, they sent tons of jujube plants to the U.S. and they were extensively planted along the southern U.S. because they're very drought tolerant fruit.
Mm.
It's got so many good things about it.
Yeah, Frank Meyer has improved our fruit genome immensely.
Tremendous.
Wonderful, wonderful
And
human.
just also to interject, well, give us a sense of the size of this tree. How big is it going to get?
So they're beautiful, small, very ornamental, disease-free trees that can be typically, I would say, around 12 feet tall.
Okay.
Um, and they're very tight and neat, and you know, I find them to be a wonderful edible landscape tree. Now, like some sucker more than others, so again, you've got potential issue with the suckering to keep on top of. But like Lee mentioned, they're super drought tolerant. These guys will grow in almost desert conditions, which is phenomenal by itself. That you've got something that will grow in poor soil and dry conditions. And a lot of people have those even in the mid-Atlantic. You know, if you've got a rocky slope or something like that, this will take rough, tough conditions and be productive. And there's a lot of different cultivars, and some are, they almost fall into two categories. One is more for fresh eating, you know, off the tree, and the other is for drying, right? And so the ones that you would dry, and as they dry, they condense their sugars, and that's where they start getting their name, you know, as the Chinese date, right? But they're very high in sugar. I mean, the bricks on these is like at 30. I mean, it's higher, you know,
Wow.
for an example, a really good apple's maybe around 20. So these are super loaded with sugar, and they're super medicinal too. They act like a nervine on the system. So like they're calming and easing. They're one of Chinese top 50 medicines as well. So they're just delicious to eat. They're just calming. And one of the reasons that they're one of my favorites is because it's what gets us out there. What are we eating? What are the children loving? You know, and jujubes are right up there for stuff that we just eat, and we do eat all day long until they're all gone. Right? You know, I'm not doing that with pawpaws. I agree. You know, I mean, one pawpaw a day is plenty. You know?
Plenty.
They're so
Yeah.
rich. So, but jujubes and gummies, which maybe I'll get to talk about, eat them all day. I've actually got a bunch of gummies I'm eating over here right now. But
The if
yeah.
I could just interject, I just looking at my book, the Uncommon Fruit book, and as far as their tolerance for soil, this just reading from the book, it says jujubes also tolerate a wide range of soil moisture conditions, as evidenced by their native habitats where rainfall might be as little as 5 inches or as many as 80 inches a year. And
Wow.
there's talk
Yeah.
of, and somewhere else it says something about the ground where they're often found is in these temple courtyards in China, where the ground's been trampled so hard it's like concrete, and they just grow there.
Yeah.
Are
So
they
they're
tap rooted, or are they like right across the soil horizon rooted?
Or, I don't think they're tap rooted.
Well, I
Okay.
think they're both because they do rhizomously, you know, sucker around. You know,
Okay.
they got some funny roots. They're trippy. They're trippy. You know, I think it's Jeff Lawton and some of those guys that are doing the work in you know, greening the desert.
Yeah.
With permaculture, I know that the jujube is one that's used in some of those driest conditions and still thrives. Now, there are reports, I think I even got out of your book, Lee, or maybe some other jujube stuff I've been reading lately, is that in the more humid regions like ours, is that productivity can be variable. But you know, we've got trees. There's a Korean church right down the street from me that's got two jujubes trees, and they are absolutely loaded. I mean, chuck a block full in this high humidity. My jujube trees are coming on. I've got maybe 3 or 4 that are starting to fruit really well. But I have 12 different cultivars now, you know, up and coming. But you know, I think we're going to get really good fruiting. Now they don't seem to like a heavy clay soil. They're going to go slower. They like a drier, so I'm sticking them in my hugelkultur beds now. And that, you know, or if I have like a drier rocky site, you know, I'm like utilizing, you know, some of those sites to grow the jujubes in. And again, they don't take much space, and they're delicious. I can't say enough about them. You can dry them and sort of cook them in like a honey-like syrup. And I'm going to start doing these for Halloween so that, you know, the kids get something special that's not full of junk, you know?
Cool.
The original jujube candy, I think it still exists. Jujubes, the candy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was jujubes cooked in a sugar.
Oh,
Yeah.
right. That makes sense of that. I never put that together. That totally makes sense. That's
Now
amazing.
they're
So
made,
Lee,
yeah.
So Lee, you've mentioned white alpine strawberry, which I don't know if I echoed, but I'll just echo. Those have the most tremendous flavor. But yes, they're very low producers, but they're just like little gems in the garden. I
Yeah, I
just
mean,
absolutely love them.
a lot of people when they come to visit, and you know, if there's some fruit ripe, I give it to taste fruit. And
Right.
alpine strawberries are one thing, without a doubt. This is true. That when I give them a taste, they taste and they go, "Wow!" Yes,
Yeah.
everybody says that. I mean, they're
Yep.
delicious and easy to grow.
Whereas black currant, I have grown to love it raw too, but most people are like, ugh, or like, wow, that's a lot. And then but then you give it to them in a jam, like Michael said, and it's a totally different experience. What would be your next plant that you're like, this is my go to? I love it forever. I'd plant it everywhere.
This is I like those three categories made it easier. I think one of them would be Nanking cherry, which I've grown.
Okay. Yes.
I've actually harvested some. I was first introduced to this when I was in graduate school. This was in Madison, Wisconsin. Very tough. You know, winters would always hit minus 25 or 30, and summers could be 100 and high humidity. And I rode my bike, and there was a golf course that had a hedge along there, and they would just hedge this plant that was about 10 feet high, and it was like a wall of Nanking cherries when they were ripe.
Whoa.
And so I've grown them, you know, for years now, and I've read about them. And the downside to them, might as well start with the downsides. The fruits are small; they're like a half to 5/8 of an inch in diameter. And also, when you
Yep.
pick them, it's sort of soft, and the stem remains on the bush, so they leave a hole. So this is something you'll never see in a supermarket because they sit for like one day. But the fruit, I think it's one of the best tasting fruits. It's there's somewhere in the spectrum between sweet and tart cherries,
Yes.
but I've tasted a lot of different seedlings, and I've never tasted any Nanking cherry that I didn't love. And I've
Mm.
squeezed them for juice. Is the most refreshing juice.
Mm-hmm.
They bloom here uh, mid August, mid April, same time as June berries, and then they ripen just after strawberries. And beautiful bush. So I have them along my driveway, and often a lot of people ride bikes on my road because since we're in this valley, there's a flat road that goes right along it, and people just stop and they wonder what this beautiful plant is, and it's just like totally white with flowers. They actually bloomed early this year, and they're just finishing up. But
Mm.
it's a great fruit, and there was some interest. They were introduced in this country in late 1800s, and people were very enthusiastic about them. So enthusiastic they didn't know should we build this as an ornamental plant or as a edible plant. You know, people didn't do edible landscaping, so you had to choose one category or the other.
Right.
And there was a whole uh, issue of American Nurseryman magazine that was devoted exclusively to Nanking cherry. And this was also one of the fruits, Michael and Jesse, also, you might be familiar with this, the 1937 Yearbook of Agriculture. Nobody knows this?
No.
It's a George Darrow, who's a famous, I don't know if you heard of Darrow Blackberry,
Yeah.
Strawberry. So he wrote a chapter in this book called Some Unusual Opportunities in Fruit Breeding. And in
Mm.
that chapter, he has Nanking cherry, he has hardy kiwi, he has persimmon. And he's got so many of these things, and they didn't take off for some reason. I think because Nanking cherry was too easy to grow. There was no challenge there. Just as an aside, this might show my age, but I met George Darrow.
Oh, cool.
I was
That's
with
cool.
I was with Mike McConkey, who
Oh yeah.
yeah, and George Darrow when he was retired, he was in his 90s when we met him. He lived in what's the place where the plant introduction centers in Maryland. Anyway, it's this
Yeah.
town, you know, just near College Park,
Yeah, yeah.
and we went to visit him sometime. It was amazing. He had all these plants there.
Yeah, I just picked up one of his che, his che fruit. I have a Darrow che.
That's the one I was going to say. He had cherry,
Yeah.
which I can't grow. It won't ripen where I am. It's not really hardy. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's a story on Nanking cherry, and it's and Frank Meyer. So
Uh-oh.
because on my row, a lot of them are seedlings because they're really easy to grow from seed. I plant the seed, you stratify it, and you give it like 2 years, 3 years at the most, and you got blossoms and fruit.
Yeah.
So I try and save my biggest and best tasting ones and grow them from seed, and I keep doing that. Maybe I don't know. I always say if I was ever going to be a plant breeder, which I don't want to be, I would breed Nanking cherries.
Yeah.
Okay.
Turned out so, and there was interest in breeding them when they were introduced in the Dakotas, where it's so, conditions are so harsh and so cold. There were some varieties selected, but there are no varieties now. They've been lost.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Like you're saying, Lee, they'll take very cold. I think that's one of their, unique things about them. Uh, and here, where we're very funky and humid and warm, I can't really successfully grow sour cherries or sweet cherries. I've
Like,
tried some of the other carmines and some of the romance series of bush cherries. The Nanking's the only one that does well, and it does do well for us. It can get some leaf funk toward the end of the season, but it's not enough to affect the health
right.
and the production, which is enormous. I mean, absolutely loaded. I get so many cherries off of them. And what I
I,
like to,
I
yeah,
should, I'll provide a picture. I have a picture of, the flowers are there's so many flowers, and the branches then become solid. You can't even see the branch usually because
right,
I have a picture of holding
yeah.
the fruit, and there's a branch there, and it's
They're
unbelievable.
gorgeous. They're gorgeous, and I like soaking them in vodka, and then I drink that after a couple of weeks, and it's nice because it has like that almond flavor to it, kind of like I do June
Oh,
berries. I
Yeah.
soak June berries in vodka because they have like a almond flavor to it as well. Highly recommend that
Well,
as a.
can you grow June berries where you are?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
That's
We
interesting because where I am, I mean, I love June berries, and they do grow in the town in New Paltz where I live. But the town it's higher ground, and I guess better conditions. But here, I had like 5 bushes that I grew for about 15 years, and I probably harvested 5 fruits because it's a,
oh,
it's a pome fruit that's related to apple, so it gets some of the same pests as apple, but
yeah,
also rust and all sorts
yeah,
of things. I
yeah.
mean,
It
the
can
fruit
get
was
funky.
warm, and there's wild ones all over. In a dry summer, uh, you can pick from the wild ones, and they're really,
Yeah.
yeah.
really
No,
good.
I love them. They do well here. I have to keep my trees pruned. I usually do them as a single trunk to get above the deer, but then I keep them thin for maximum airflow. And most years I can get a really good crop before they can get mummified. And their leaves, will drop earlier than others. So it's on the fringe for me because, I don't like things that take much input, but they're worth it because they're like cherry pie. They taste like cherry pie.
With a
Yeah.
little almond
Yeah.
Yep.
taste.
Yeah, they grow great here in Michigan. Thank the Lord.
Yeah.
We love them. What do you
Anything
got here as a picture, Michael?
What did I put up there? Oh, that's Gumi.
Oh, Gumi.
Gumi.
All right.
Yeah, we
Come
got to talk
on.
about. Actually, I got a whole thing of frozen Gumis here. If you guys have been seeing me eat stuff, that's these
It's
Gumi
Gumi.
berries. Even frozen, they're delicious. So, Gumi berry, and one of my favorites, for many reasons. It's super tough, super easy to grow, fruits within a couple of years. It's medicinal. It's a nitrogen fixer, and they're just delicious. They're like like Lee in his book says they're sweet and sprite and tart.
Yes.
Speaking of drinks, if you juice these, that makes the perfect margarita mix because it's got
Oh,
that. It's got that sweet tart, and then it almost has like a little bit of like a tacky, dry finish. You don't need to add anything else but your tequila. It's super good.
now we're getting into vodka and
Yeah,
tequila
well,
suggestions.
hey, you find out when you start growing a lot of fruit and you get all this fruit. It's like, what am I going to do with all this fruit? The
True.
easiest thing to process it into is alcohol.
Yeah,
And sometimes
true.
if I just drop that into vodka, then it's like, okay, well, I don't have to think about it anymore. I'm
Right.
done. I can move on. You can only freeze so much fruit and make jam and da 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 da. So yeah, I preserve it, make wines out of it. Gumi wine is delicious. It is, you can't say a lot of fruit wines are that good, to be honest.
Yeah.
But Gumi makes an excellent wine. It makes a
Okay.
very full-bodied wine that has a very high alcohol content, 18, 19%, and it's got a spirit that will make you loopy.
Well, I
Uh,
should say that I'm not a drinker of hard liquor, but I do drink beer sometimes, and I've used in my beer black currants, both the
Oh,
fruit, and sometimes I use just the leaves. The leaves have a very strong fragrance,
Great
which I happen to love. Some people don't like them. When I was doing research for my book, the Black Currant chapter, I had some stuff translated from Russian, and the translator told me she said that in Russia they don't like that smell of the leaves because it's the same smell as bed bugs, which I have
Ugh,
fortunately not smelled ever.
me neither.
But and then the other fruit that I've used in the fruit that I another fruit, the fruit itself, not the leaves, that I've used in beers, American persimmon.
Oh,
Uh,
oh, that's one of my favorites. I got some pictures of those too. Let me
we'll
just
get to
finish
that one.
saying. Let me just saying about the gumi here.
Yeah.
It's so productive. It's mostly self-fruitful. So if you have one, you're probably going to get plenty of fruit. Two, you'll have more fruit. But I've never picked all the fruit even off one bush.
Yeah.
Um, and they're beautiful. They don't have any disease on them. They have like this silvery underleaf. So when the wind is moving it, it like shimmers. They make nice foundation plants against your house. In full sun, very happy. They can be 8, 10 feet tall by the same width. In the shade, they're going to be a little bit smaller, probably. They'll fruit decently in partial shade. One of the few that I will say you'll still get quite a few fruits from in partial shade. There's only a handful of cultivars out there. My two favorite are Sweet Scarlet and Carmine.
Oh, I just somebody just I grow gumi, and everything you said concurs with my gumi. It's
Nice.
a pest free. You just I don't do anything at all to that except pick them. And but somebody just sent me a cutting of carmine, and
Mm.
I'm looking forward to trying it. Is it
It's large. It's a large berry. So Sweet Scarlet and Red Gem's the other one you'll find in the nursery industry.
do they
Um,
taste differently?
They do. They do. Let me see if I can hold one of these up. This right here is this is a Sweet Scarlet.
Right, it's not
So
that big.
you
I think
know,
they're bigger.
quarter inch, but then the Carmine is going to be at least twice the size all the way
Yeah.
around.
Wow.
So definitely bigger, juicier. I think they're good. I find the Sweet Scarlet to be a little more tart, which I like. And so the Carmine, Tillamook, I think is another name for Carmine. So if you see Tillamook for sale, it's the same as Carmine. But yeah, we love them both. I have Red Gem, but I'm not crazy about the Red Gem.
And they are beautiful
Yeah,
plants.
and they are beautiful, and they're also related to the autumn olive, which is quite like pernicious around here in disturbed landscapes. And people consider it like semi-invasive essentially here, but very similar flavor in my experience with gumi. But gumi is
Yeah.
just a bigger, more reliable producer in my garden.
Actually,
So
I find
I
I find them I find them quite different in flavor because the
oh,
gumi
do you?
always has a certain amount of astringency and tartness, whereas the autumn olive, I find that there's a 2 week window, at the end of the season. If you pick them then, they're just sweet. The funny part is autumn olive. I've given a lot of talks on common fruits, and I can't mention it because it's really considered
Right.
invasive here, and I think it's not you're not allowed to plant it even. So but
Right.
even if you were allowed, I know people would just descend on me. It's like all the
It's not worth it.
native fruit people would be going or native plant people. But I really like it. And I think it's a great plant in so many ways. And the funny part is, one time we had this association just locally of farmers, and I guess farmers and a Farmdener, and
That's right.
we meet once a month or so and bring something to eat. So I actually had a yellow autumn olive and a red one, and I mixed them together in a bowl and I brought it. And I was going to use the Japanese name for them because I didn't want to say autumn olive because people attack me. So it's akigumi. No, that's the other one. Aki something else. And everybody tastes them. You can eat the seed even, and
Yep.
everybody's loving them. And then I said, okay, I figure I'll just tell them now. Now that they love food so much, so I said, you know what? This is real. The English name for this, it's autumn olive. And they said, yes. What's that?
Oh,
they didn't. They hadn't heard it all.
didn't matter anyway.
That's a great trick. I grow a number of cultivars of autumn olive, and I will say my favorite is amber. It's a yellow
Oh, yeah,
golden
yellow.
one.
Hmm.
and it is super sweet, juicy, gorgeous.
Mm.
I grow them as like a small single trunk tree, or you can cut them back. They don't have to become a large bush, though they will. But I'm a big fan of them. Big fan of autumn olives.
Well, I
That's
had two that I got
yeah.
Hidden Spring Nurseries, 25 years ago, and one was Charlie's Golden, which actually never ripens to really good flavor for me. But the
Hector
other,
Black,
Mm.
yeah.
but the other one, right? Yeah, great guy.
Yeah, Hector Black's one of our nurserymen elders.
He died.
Yeah, I believe it. I think he was in his 90s, last I heard.
Yeah,
So,
I met him in the early '90s, not in his early '90s, in the early
what
'90s.
was he like? What kind of character was he?
He's like a saint.
Yeah,
You know the story about him?
not much.
His daughter. Oh,
I
I
know.
should.
Yeah,
I'll send it to you. This is. He's a saint.
yeah. Well, I
He's
know he did a
cool.
lot of work with a lot of good plant genetics, and especially with the autumn olive, and then ironically, I think it's what Tennessee, and then they outlawed autumn olive. So if you want to get a Hector Black, cultivar, you got to get it from California now.
But the red one that I got from them, from his daughter runs the nursery,
Yeah, Annie Black, right? Yeah.
and that one was really good, and it died. It's like everybody's talking about this invasive plant. I want it to be invasive, and it died. So
It
I'm
can
gonna
invade me. Yeah.
I'm gonna replant it. But yeah, it's another great plant that you can't talk about growing here. You probably that's one thing I'll say for permaculture people. I think I probably could talk about it to them.
Well, that's true. Yeah, yeah, that's definitely true. I see persimmon on the screen here. Is this
Yeah,
make your list, Lee, as well? I see Michael brought it up.
100% on my list. Unbelievable,
Okay, go.
easy to grow, pretty tree. Uh, bears a lot, depending on the variety. Bears tons of fruit, and depending on the variety, bears really quickly. You grow the right variety. You don't need cross pollination. So one tree, and you can grow up pretty far north. So where I am, the temperatures used to get to -20 every year. Now they only get a little below zero, and this area flooded during Hurricane Irene back in 2011, and my tree, which has a trunk like this, uh,
Whoa.
the water was 4 feet high up the tree, and
Wow.
and then it was followed by Tropical Storm Lee, and so that was like a week of pretty deep inundation, and it's in a wet spot, and it has never. Oh no, one year we had a very cold, rainy summer. That was the only year the fruit didn't ripen, but I've had
Mm.
ripe fruit every single year for over 30 years.
Yeah.
Wow. And we're talking American persimmon, just to be
American.
clear.
And
Yeah.
the only thing about where, if you go far north, like where I am, the tree is totally hardy, but you have to get a variety that tastes good. Some of them, I don't like any astringency, so that's finicky about that. And it has to ripen within the growing season. That's important because it won't ripen. People think it ripens with frost, but it needs a certain length of a growing season. And the two varieties that I grow that I like the best are Zucchus, Zukis, and Moeller, Mohler.
Hmm.
And they ripen. Moeller starts ripening end of August, and Zucchus end of September.
Yeah, yeah. They have a huge range of soils. So we have a very wet site, and they grow in our almost completely wet soil. And then they'll grow in sandy soil, on dry, outcroppings. They're just super tough, which I love about them. And then they're super productive. I mean, you can get like 100 pounds of fruit off of a tree. But
Right.
you really definitely want to be getting the good genetics when it comes to the American persimmon. Because most people have a bad experience with persimmons because they try ones before they're ripe or ones that never really lose their astringency. And there's actually two categories if you want to geek out on American persimmons. There's 90 chromosome and 60 chromosome persimmons. Basically, the 90 chromosome are more indigenous to the upper Midwest, and the 60 chromosome American persimmons are more in the Southeast. And most of the delicious cultivars and ones that we've been very fortunate to have wonderful people breed come from that 90 chromosome group. But a lot of people will try, a 60 chromosome unselected persimmon, and it'll just like a vacuum cleaner in your mouth. It's like it's terrible. Once you get in your mouth, it'll take like an hour or two to like get this gnarly film out of your mouth. So
Yeah.
once that happens, people are like, "Oh man, persimmons are terrible." Whereas you get a good cultivar like Proc or the couple that Lee mentioned as well, and you get them, you can almost eat them right off the tree with no astringency. So it's a
Oh,
very different experience.
you definitely can eat them off the tree with no astringency,
Yeah.
as long as they're soft and ripe.
And
Yeah.
and they don't need freezing. That's another sort of, more of those southeastern ones where, you want them to freeze and try to get more sugar and just get better, but even then they're probably not that great. So these you can eat right off the tree, and some are seedless, completely, and they're like jelly in there. I think Lee, I'll use your words. They're like apricot,
Wait,
apricots.
wait, wait. I'll say it. It's like if you took a really good dried apricot, you soaked it in water, dip it in honey, and give it a dash of spice.
Nice. Yes.
That sounds
Yes.
divine.
So they're similar. They're different, even though it's the same genus. Different from the Asian persimmons in that the fruit is smaller, and it's definitely generally drier, but it has a much richer flavor. I actually have tasted a lot of Asian persimmons also, and I much prefer the American persimmon.
Yeah.
Same here. Same here. And yeah, so that's my favorite fruits. I'd say pawpaw, jujubes, and persimmons. Persimmons are right up there for me. The flavor is so intense. It's like the pawpaw in the sense that it's a very exotic fruit that grows in the north. And Lee, is it in the ebony family? Has it got some?
Yeah, yeah,
So it's got some different root history too. It's a unique character for the northern climate as
right.
well, and it's got a wide growing range as well. I think it'll grow down in zone, pretty much like pawpaw, probably like zone 5 through zone 9.
Yeah.
Pretty broad. And again, there's different ones for the more northern. Proc will grow well in fruit more in the north as well. So
Is Prague a hybrid of Asian?
no.
Oh,
No, as far as I understand, it's straight American, and it does wonderful here, and it's very tasty here. The challenge is when people talk about cultivars and like, oh well, someone will say Proc, they're growing it in a different part of the country on a different soil. It's going to be a different flavor profile than say what I'm growing here. So a lot of times you can't necessarily say, well, Proc's really good. For me, someone else is going to have a different. Same with some of the pawpaw cultivars. So it's not always the same. So if someone says they don't like, Proc, and there's certain reasons, that doesn't mean that it won't do well for you or taste differently on your site.
it's interesting that that stringency, like the vacuum cleaner in your mouth, that comes from persimmon. By the way, it has got a lot of bad press in the past because of that. Captain John Smith said it will draw a man's mouth awry with much torment. But I have a friend. This is amazing. This guy loves persimmons. He will eat them green. He doesn't.
Ooh.
Oh,
I don't know. I don't know if he
he has different enzymes.
yeah, something's going on because nobody else on this planet would do that.
No. And
Or
I'll
is it
throw out there,
masochist?
I'll throw out there that I don't like the cultivar meter. You're going to see meter in the industry, and I do not recommend meter.
I agree.
For persimmon.
I agree 100%. I feel
Yeah.
bad about it because I actually visited Elwin Meter back in the 70s. He was a great guy. He was like so sharing. I don't know if in those days if I got people's phone number, but I popped up in a lot of places, and I would just go in there, and then somebody would show me around, and and he sent me the sign wood of Meter persimmon. I grafted it, and I had the tree for years, and it just never loses that astringency.
Yeah.
And just another anecdote. So Elwin Meter at that time, he was in his 70s, and he looked very. I have a great picture of him. He looked very New England. He had one of those beards like this, wearing a railroad cap, and very upright growing. Stood very upright, and he had, I think, either an acre or two of blueberries that he was growing, and he netted them, and I net mine also. And I said, "How do you net?" And, at his age, how do you net? I shouldn't say that because he was probably younger than me, but now.
Yeah.
But I said, "How do you net an acre of blueberries?" And he'd stand up like they used to, like takes a very patient man to net an acre of blueberries. And I always think of that when my wife and I are putting up the net.
Yes,
Nice.
that's
Yeah.
beautiful. I love
What,
that
what,
story.
wasn't he a contemporary of McDaniel's? Weren't they doing some work together? Sort
I,
of
I
amateur.
don't, yeah, I don't doubt it because they surely knew each other and they're both like growing these fruits. He also did a lot of work on hardy kiwi fruit. There's
Yes.
meter male. I don't know if there's a meter female variety.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, guys, hey, we're actually up on time here, and I want to be respectful of your time. We, of course, did not get through all 10 plants of each of your lists. I mean, maybe we need to do a part two. I would be happy to do that with you guys. I don't know if that's something you're interested in.
Yeah.
But let's end with, if you don't mind, yeah, Michael, we'll get to that in a second. Just a real quick bit of advice for maybe somebody starting to put in a food forest. How would you go about doing a weed-free garden, both of you? What would be your general approach, just in a couple sentences or more? Lee, I'll start with you since you've
Well,
written about
I generally do newspaper cover with mulch, but I have to say that I don't agree with putting down permaculture. What permaculture is the cardboard with mulch
Yeah,
on top, because I like to have a connection quicker between the soil and the mulch. On the other hand, I have to say that I have this amazing invasion of Canadian thistle, and I just went to this permaculture person that I know in New Paltz. Said, "Where can I get some cardboard?" And I'm putting down cardboard there. It's just too much.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I
So when
agree.
you say, real quick, Michael, sorry to interrupt. When you say mulch, Lee, what's your preference? Is it like wood chips? Is it leaves? Is it grass clippings?
Well, whatever I can get easily, and I always have a pile of wood chips that I use. Though I'm a little finicky. I have this one arborist that gives me these really beautiful wood chips. They're all about this size and it's uniform. And some other arborist dumped this crappy wood. But I use that, or I use leaves, wood shavings. I used to go to a sawmill, a small sawmill, and just use sawdust.
Uh,
Basically anything. And the
Anything
other thing is
what you
in
got?
my garden, my vegetable garden, the beds, they get compost. I
Okay.
make I make a lot of compost, too much compost.
Michael, what's your approach?
Same, newspaper, so in the garden, on the beds, I do use newspaper, but then if I'm working in the food forest or in my pathways, I use cardboard. So, I will use them kind of in different scenarios. And then wood chips, wood chips, wood chips. I mean, I have troubles putting it across to people that the answer is almost as simple as wood chips, and improving your soil, and holding more moisture, and just dump them, and dump them deep and give them time. And you're going to build these awesome fungal networks that kill off what's beneath it. You need a good 8-inch depth. Cardboard's nice because it can cut that down. If you don't have a lot of wood chips or something, cardboard you don't have to go as deep. It's going to help kill off that layer underneath. But
Also,
time, time
also if you
is
have
a factor.
also if you have thistle, I don't think wood chips even 8 inches would stop that.
No, yeah,
Not
yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah. You want cardboard there, so certain depends, but yeah. So
But
yeah, I use tons of cardboard. It's all around us. Everyone's got cardboard karma. So you might you might as well work on that.
Put it
But
to good use.
and it's true like you said, it's simple. People try and complicate everything.
I know,
That's why I wish I had people ask me questions. I wish I had this complex thing.
right?
You got fertilized with this stuff in the spring, and then the summer goose it with this stuff, and then this stuff. It's just And speaking of wood chips, so my blueberries, which I have to say, is the healthiest blueberries plants I've ever seen. Uh, they grow, they grow a little too vigorously, and I used to put down every year. The only thing I put down was some soybean meal for extra nitrogen, and wood chips or something else. But wood chips was definitely my preference. I like wood chips. And for the past few years, I realized they're growing too vigorously, so I have not put anything down for 5 or more years. And the plants, I have 16 plants, and we harvest about 200 quarts a year.
Wow.
Wow, that's
So,
amazing.
and the thing is, as the wood chips degrade, they're like feeding the ground.
It's
And
the
Yeah.
best soil ever. On the wood chips, just a real quick question. I've heard that sometimes if it's right around the base of a woody plant or a tree, it can cause fungal issues. Do you guys like have a little area right around the base of a
right,
tree that you keep free from wood chips?
definitely.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Always.
Not a problem around shrubs though, because shrubs are always sending
Right.
loose roots up from ground level. Just trees, you know.
Very good. Thank you so much. Well, guys, thank you so much. I have your websites up. You can check out more about Michael and buy his books at ecologiadesign.com and Lee Reich at leereich.com. But also, Michael, you have a generous offer that you'd like to share. So let me put that up and tell us about it, please.
I'm just gonna bow out because I got a guy doing a perk test here, and I want to. He's leaving.
Hey, bow out. Thank you so much, Lee. It was awesome to meet you, and I hope to do a part 2 with you sometime.
Yeah, definitely, and I'll send you some images.
All right.
Please
Always
do.
a pleasure, Lee. Always a
And
pleasure.
everybody go buy Lee's books. They're
I'm
amazing.
gonna visit sometimes, Michael.
Yes.
I don't know how to get out of this.
I'll kick you out.
Okay.
See you, buddy.
See ya.
Classic. Yeah, I was going to say, so I've got my course for the love of pawpaws, which, everything from starting from seed to growing them out, to setting the stage for them, recipes, et cetera, I put all into this course. And I've been doing another webinar in the same time period where I've put these at 40% off. So I'm going to extend that to the PINA community here. And I'm also going to add in, I've got some of my select pawpaw seeds, perfectly stratified. These are the best pawpaw genetics in the world right here. And I also, in my webinar, offered the first 10 people to sign up for the course, I will send you like 10 of these choice pawpaw seeds. So I'll extend that too to the PINA community. Also, or my mushroom course, how to grow gourmet mushrooms. I will send seeds to the first 10 people that sign up for either one of those courses, which currently are 40% off. So just wanted to extend that.
Man, I love it. I absolutely love it. You've always been, since I've known about you anyway, very generous with gifts and exchanges and trying to give back to the community. And I think what you're offering with both these courses, I want to personally take them. I don't know if I'm allowed to since I work with PINA, but when you say the genetics of the seeds, are those from some of those cultivars that you mentioned?
They're
earlier?
so all the pawpaws that I have are all grafted cultivars. I don't have any wild pawpaws that are crossing with them, and I don't have any trial pawpaws. So a lot of times when you find select pawpaws or select seedlings, they're coming from mixed orchards that are sometimes still trialing things, so you're not quite sure. That's why I can say that these are probably the best on the planet, because they're coming almost all from Neil Peterson cultivars. So even though you can't name them as a cultivar, these have the best genetics in them. And heck, you grow these out, you might come up with a new cultivar.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you're going to start, no matter what, you're getting some really good genetics to start with, and you're going to have wonderfully flavorful pawpaws. So thanks again, Michael. This is a great offer, and thanks for sharing your knowledge with us here. I'm a plant geek too, but nowhere near the level that you two are. So I've gleaned a lot of great information, a lot of great cultivars, and just keep growing, my friend, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, yeah, I'd love to do another one with Lee. Lee is, he's the guru. I love any interactions with him, and I've really enjoyed this. And there's so many more things that we didn't even touch on.
That's how I feel.
So I'd be down with session 2 with Lee anytime.
That sounds good, man. We'll plan that afterwards. And thanks everybody for being here live. And if you're not with us live, go ahead and check out the courses, and the links are in the chat. And then we'll also put them in the show notes when the podcast comes out so people can check that out. All right. Thanks again, Michael. Appreciate your time. Thanks everybody. We'll see you soon.
See ya.